She came out of the lane before the frost did, and the town of Marston smelled of wet wool, tallow smoke, and the sour green of the tannery down by the bridge. It was the 3rd week of Advent, and the sky over the church tower had gone the colour of a wrung cloth. Wren Aldridge walked with her chin down and her basket up, the way a woman walks when she has learned that looking at people costs something she cannot spare. She was the kind of woman a room forgot the moment she left it. Not ugly, not pretty, not anything a stranger could describe an hour later. 20 and 6 years old, her father dead of a fever 3 winters back. Her mother longer than that. She made gloves. She had made them since she was 8, sitting at her father's bench learning the pull of a needle through kid leather, and she made them still, alone now, in the 2 rooms above the chandler's shop that she rented by the quarter and was always a week behind on. Her hands told the story her face did not. The first 2 fingers of her right hand were permanently flattened at the tip from the awl. There was a white seam of scar across her left thumb, where a blade had slipped when she was 11, and her father had bound it himself and told her a glove-maker's hands were her whole fortune. So mind them. She minded them. It was, she sometimes thought, the only thing in the world she had ever been careful with. The bridge over the mill race had been groaning since Michaelmas, and everyone in Marston said someone was going to go through the planking before the frost broke, and nobody had mended it. That was the town's trouble, not hers. Her trouble this morning was smaller and colder. She had 4 shillings in the pocket sewn inside her cloak, saved a farthing at a time since October, meant for a roll of good glace leather from the carrier on Thursday. Without it she would be stitching pig hide through February and calling it fine work to customers who would know better. She turned down Cross Lane toward the parish house, meaning only to pass it, and that was when she heard the woman crying, without making a sound. It is a particular kind of crying, the kind that has had all the noise starved out of it. Wren had heard it before, from her own mother, near the end. She stopped. The forward promise in her mind arrived plain and unbidden, the way weather does. Something was going to happen before she reached the carrier's cart on Thursday. She did not know yet that it had already begun. The clerk's window at the parish house stood open on its hinge despite the cold, because the clerk liked to be seen not to keep the poor waiting, even while he did. Behind the sill sat Mr. Pell, a narrow man with ledger fingers and a nose permanently pinched, as if the whole world came to him smelling of something. In front of the sill stood a girl no older than 17, a shawl over a shawl, and in her arms a bundle so small it might have been mistaken for laundry if it had not moved. 2 shillings for the register and the fee, Mr. Pell was saying, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. I do not make the rule, Pegdallow. No fee, no name in the book, no name in the book, no christening. It is not my church to give away for free. I have not got 2 shillings, the girl said. I have not got 2 farthings. Then the vicar cannot do it Sunday. He is not a week old, Peg said. The midwife said he is not strong. If he goes without a name and God calls him home unchristened, that is on your ledger, Mr. Pell, not mine. Mr. Pell closed the window an inch, which was his version of a shrug. Wren had not planned to speak. She did not remember deciding to. She only knew that her hand was inside her cloak, on the little cloth purse with its 4 shillings sewn to it, before her mind had finished arguing with itself. I will pay it, she said. Mr. Pell reopened the window. He looked at her plain wool cloak and her basket of half-finished gloves, and did the sum in his head, the sum everyone in Marston did about her, without meaning to be cruel. Not much. Not nothing, not much. The fee is 2 shillings for the register, he said again, as if she had not understood the size of the number. She counted it into his hand herself, coin by coin, and did not let herself think about the carrier's cart on Thursday, or the pig hide, or February. Peg Dallow stared at her. I cannot pay you back. I did not ask you to. Why would you do such a thing for me? Wren looked down at the small bundle, at the one visible fist no bigger than a walnut, curled the way fists curl in sleep, whether they are born to a duke or to no one at all. I would have done it for anyone, she said, and she believed it, and that was the whole of her reason, and she turned and walked away before the girl could find a way to thank her properly, because being thanked properly was a thing Wren Aldridge had never learned how to bear. She did not see the man in the plain grey coat, standing 3 feet behind her in the queue, who had come to the parish house that morning for reasons of his own, and who had heard every word. He had come to Milestone on foot, in a coat with no crest on the buttons, to look at a parish poor roll he did not trust his own steward to read to him honestly. He had told the innkeeper his name was Mr. Cardew, which was true enough, being his own name, only not the whole of it. He was not accustomed to standing in queues. He found he did not mind it as much as he had supposed he would. He had watched the girl in the plain cloak give up what was plainly the better part of her week's living for a child she owed nothing to, a mother she had never met. In front of a clerk who would forget her by supper, and a beggar girl who could do nothing for her ever, not now, not later, not in any coin that counted in the world, Julian Cardew, Duke of Faircross, had been raised to measure people by. She had not looked round to see if anyone of consequence was watching. That was the whole of what struck him. She had not looked round at all. She did not know then that the man in the grey coat owned the ground the parish house stood on, and the mill whose race had frozen the bridge planks, and a good third of the county besides, and that within the hour he would be asking the innkeeper, in a voice gone carefully idle, who the woman in the brown cloak might be. Wren went back to the chandler's rooms with 3 shillings less than she had left with, and no leather coming on Thursday, and she told herself, climbing the narrow stair, that it did not matter, that pig hide stitched carefully enough could pass, that she had done what anyone would do, and there was an end to it. She did not cry. She had learned some winters back that crying changed nothing about a purse, and so she had stopped doing it where it showed, and mostly stopped doing it at all. Peg Dallow found her 2 streets later, breathless, the baby wrapped tighter, now against the wind. "At least tell me your name," she said, "so I know who to bless." "Wren Aldridge," she said, because it seemed unkind to refuse a name to a woman who had nothing else to give with it. "I make gloves, above the chandler's. That is the whole of me. There is no more to know." There was in fact a great deal more to know, though Wren herself would have been the last person in Milestone to say so. Mr. Cardew did not go back to the inn directly. He stood a while at the corner of Cross Lane, in the smell of coal smoke and wet stone, and thought about a girl who wept prettily once, years ago, in his own front hall, over a dress ruined by a servant's clumsiness, and who he had very nearly married. Iris Culworth had wept beautifully. She had also, that same winter, had a housemaid turned off without a character for the crime of a broken glass. He had not understood at 23 that these 2 facts belonged in the same ledger. He understood it now. "Who is she?" he asked the innkeeper that evening, over a pipe he did not smoke and a fire he did not need, the woman who mends gloves above the chandler's. Aldridge her name was. Wren Aldridge. quiet sort. Keeps to herself. Father was the best glove-maker this side of the Shire before he died, and she is nearly as good, though nobody much troubles to find out, her being a woman working alone above a candle shop. The innkeeper shrugged, poor as the church mouse, and prouder than she has any right to be about it. Won't take charity. Turned down the vicar's basket last Christmas on the grounds she hadn't earned it. Does she have family? None living. No sweetheart neither, if that's what you're circling round to, sir, if you'll pardon me asking. She keeps herself to herself, and her needle to her work. The Duke of Faircross said nothing further on the subject that night, which the innkeeper took, correctly, to mean the subject was far from closed. By morning Mr. Pell the clerk received, by an anonymous hand, a note instructing him that Peg Dallow's rent at the widow Cotter's lodging-house was to be paid quarterly from a fund the note did not name, and that the christening register was to record the boy as Samuel, and that no one, on pain of the sender's displeasure, was to say who had arranged it. Mrs. Herrick, housekeeper at Faircross these 22 years, received a different letter from her own master, asking her to find, discreetly, whether the glove-maker's daughter above the chandler's shop in Milestone might be persuaded to take on fine work for the house. The wardrobe gloves wanted mending. The lady's gloves in particular, kept from his late mother's time, wanted a hand steadier and finer than the estate currently employed. Mrs. Herrick read this letter twice, set it down, and said to the empty still-room, "Well now," in the tone of a woman who has kept a great many of her master's secrets and expects, not without some pleasure, to be keeping a new one shortly. Wren received the summons 3 days later, delivered by a groom who would say only that the house wanted a glove-maker and would pay by the piece and in advance for materials, which was, in her experience, not how great houses paid anyone. She went because 4 shillings gone meant she could not afford the pride of refusing, and because, though she would not have said this aloud to a living soul, she had not stopped thinking of the fist no bigger than a walnut, curled the way fists curl, whether born to plenty or to nothing. She did not know then that the man who had arranged both the rent and the summons was the same man who had stood behind her in a queue and said not one word. Faircross, when she saw it first, was not what she had built in her mind on the walk out. She had pictured marble and gilt, something to make a glove-maker's daughter feel the size of a mouse in a granary. Instead, she found grey stone gone soft at the corners with age, ivy cut back hard for winter, smoke rising honest and grey from a dozen chimneys, and Mrs. Herrick waiting at the servants' door, with her arms folded, and her face already deciding it liked her. "You'll be Aldridge, Mrs." Herrick said. "Come in out of that wind before you catch your death, and mind the step, it drops further than it looks." The workroom they gave her had better light than her own rooms had ever had, north-facing, clean, a proper bench, and a chest of gloves that had clearly not been touched by careful hands in a long while. She worked through the morning in something close to peace, the first she had felt since Cross Lane, and it was past noon before the door opened and a man came in wearing a coat with no crest on the buttons, and she knew him at once, and did not know him at all. "Mr. Cardew," she said, because that was the name the innkeeper's boy had given the groom, and the groom had given her. "Miss Aldridge." He looked, for a moment, at the glove in her hands, at the neat small stitches closing a seam that had split at the withdrawal glove of a lady 20 years dead. "You mend as well as you give away shillings, then?" Her hands went still on the leather. "You were behind me. At the parish house." "I was. You said nothing." There was nothing that wanted saying. You did not do it to be watched. She looked at him properly then, for the first time, the way she had not let herself look at anyone in a long while, because looking cost something. He was not a handsome man in the way the word was generally used. His nose had been broken once and set slightly wrong. His eyes were a brown gone nearly black in the workroom's grey light, and they did not move off her face the way most men's eyes did, downward, assessing the cut of her cloak and the state of her boots, and dismissing her accordingly. "Are you steward here?" she asked. "Or something above it?" "Something above it," he said, which was true, and told her nothing, which he intended. "Then I will not ask further. It is not my place." "It is not a question of place, Miss Aldridge. It is a question of what a person tells another person, and when, and why." He said this with more weight than the moment plainly called for, and seemed briefly to hear himself say it, and looked away first, toward the window, toward the bare-cut ivy and the grey afternoon. "You have the look," she said before she could stop herself, "of a man carrying something he has not put down in a long while." He was quiet long enough that she thought she had overstepped, glove-maker to gentleman, and began composing an apology she did not, in the end, need to give. "I was engaged to be married once," he said instead. "She wept a great deal, and very well, and I mistook that for a soft heart. She turned a housemaid off without a character over a broken glass, the same winter she wept over her wedding gown getting a spot of rain on it. I did not see the two things belonged together until it was very nearly too late." He looked back at her. "I have found I trust weeping less than I used to, and quiet more." "I do not weep much," Wren said. "It changes nothing about a bill owing." "No," he said. "I noticed that too." She bent back to her work because she did not know what to do with her face otherwise, and he watched her a moment longer than was strictly necessary for a man who had only come to check on the wardrobe gloves, and then he left, and neither of them said anything further that day, and both of them thought about it a great deal that night, in separate houses, by separate fires, for reasons neither would have confessed to the other yet. Winter thinned toward its middle, and Wren's days took a shape she had not had since her father died. 3 mornings a week she walked to Faircross, and worked the light of the north room until her fingers ached in the good way, the way of use rather than cold, and twice a week Mr. Cardew came to look over the finished work with a thoroughness no steward's business required. She learned, without meaning to collect it, a great many small things about him, that he rid the estate accounts himself rather than trusting a clerk, that he was awkward with children and better with dogs, that he had a laugh when it came, which was rare enough that Mrs. Herrick once remarked on hearing it that the sky ought by rights to have done something notable in response. She also learned from Mrs. Herrick, over tea in the servants' hall, that Peg Dallow's rent at the Widow Cotter's had been settled by some unnamed hand, and that the boy Samuel had been christened after all. Safe and named and thriving despite the midwife's fears, and Wren felt a warmth about this she did not examine too closely, the warmth of a debt she had not asked to be repaid, finding its own quiet way home to someone. "Do you know who arranged it?" Wren asked. "I have my suspicions," Mrs. Herrick said, in the voice of a woman who intends to keep them exactly where they are. "It is not my tale to tell, Aldridge. Ask me again when it is." Wren did not ask again. She went back to her bench, and to the glove in her hand, a lady's dancing glove from some season long past, and thought, not for the first time, that Faircross kept its secrets the way a well keeps water, deep down and cold and out of the light. The Duke found her that afternoon in the north room alone, the light going long and gold across the bench, and stood in the doorway a moment before she noticed him. "You are frowning at that glove as if it insulted you," he said. "The lady who wore this had smaller hands than mine and a worse seamstress. I am only correcting an old wrong." She held it up. Whoever mended this last did not care if it lasted. I care if it lasts. That is, I think, the entire difference between people worth trusting and people not, he said. Though I did not come here to make speeches at you. "Why did you come then, Mr. Cardew?" He did not answer at once, and in the space where the answer should have been, something passed over his face that she could not name, something that looked almost like a man standing at the edge of telling the truth and stepping back from it. "To see the gloves," he said finally. "As I said." It was not, she thought, watching him go, entirely the truth, and she found she minded that less than she ought to have, which alarmed her rather more than the lie itself. Lady Cassandra Thorne came to Faircross the 2nd week of February, the way weather comes, without asking leave and leaving damage. She was the Duke's cousin on his mother's side, handsome in the sharp manner of a well-kept knife, and she had decided some years before that Faircross and its master belonged, by every rule of sense and blood, to her own eventual arranging. She had a laugh like a small bell rung 3 times, always 3, never more, and she used it now, standing in the north room's doorway, looking at Wren's bench and Wren's hands. "So this is the glove girl Mrs. Herrick has been so mysterious about." The bell laugh, 3 notes. "Julian, you cannot possibly mean to have the house's fine leather handled by someone whose own hands look like she has been digging turnips." Wren did not look up from her seam, though her fingers, for one instant, went still. "Miss Aldridge's work is the finest this house has seen in a decade," the Duke said, and his voice had gone very level, the level of a man holding a temper by the collar. "I am sure it is adequate." Lady Cassandra came further into the room, skirts arranged to make the smallest space feel crowded. "Tell me, Miss Aldridge, is it not strange, mending gloves for hands so much finer than your own? Does it not gall, just a little?" "No, my lady." Wren set the glove down and looked up, and her voice, when it came, was very plain and very even. "A hand is a hand, whoever it belongs to. I have mended worse for less, and been glad of the work. There is no shame in a seam well made, whoever pays for it or wears it after. How very content you are with your station." The bell laugh again, thinner this time. "I am content with my work," Wren said. "Station is a thing other people decide about you. Work is a thing you decide about yourself." She picked the glove back up. "Fair is not the same as kind, my lady. There is a difference, and I have had cause to learn it." Lady Cassandra's mouth tightened, the knife's edge catching light. She turned to her cousin instead, since the glove-maker had declined to be wounded on schedule. "Julian, you cannot seriously entertain." "I entertain nothing, Cassandra, beyond good work fairly done," the Duke said. "Miss Aldridge has business to attend to, and so, I think, do you, elsewhere. It was not a raised voice. It did not need to be." Lady Cassandra left the room with her skirts still arranging themselves into a fence, and Wren bent back over the seam, her hands, she noted with some private satisfaction, entirely steady. "I am sorry for that," the Duke said, once the door had shut. "You need not be. I have had worse said to me by people with far less reason to think themselves my betters." She tied off the thread. "She is not wrong that my hands look like turnips, my lord. They do. It is honest work that makes them so, and I am not ashamed of it." "No," he said. "I do not imagine you are ashamed of very much that is true." He watched her a moment. "I would ask you not to let her make you smaller than you are." I have been made small by better people than Lady Cassandra Thorne, Wren said, and I am still here, my lord, and so are my hands, and so is the work. She held up the finished glove, and something in the plain fact of it, whole and mended and useless to argue with, ended the conversation better than either of them could have. The trouble came, as trouble does, from the direction least guarded. It was Mrs. Herrick who let it slip, not from malice but from long habit. One evening, when Wren had stayed late over a particularly fine pair of dress gloves, and the housekeeper had brought tea to the north room out of simple kindness. "His Grace will be glad to see those finished before the assembly, Mrs." Herrick said, and then heard herself, and went the colour of the tea. Wren set her needle down very carefully. "His Grace. Aldridge, I miscarred you, is the Duke of Faircross." It was not a question, and Mrs. Herrick, to her credit, did not try to make it one by answering it as a lie. "Yes, the man who has been coming here twice a week to look at gloves. The man who stood behind me at the parish house and never said a word while I gave away money I could not spare, and let me believe him a steward, or a guest, or nothing at all, for near 2 months. He had his reasons, I am sure. I am sure he did," Wren said. And her voice had gone very flat and very quiet, the voice of a woman closing a ledger she did not like the sum of. Everyone always has their reasons for what they let a person believe. She finished the gloves that night, because she had given her word on the work, and a debt of the hands, at least, she intended to pay in full. She did not go back the following morning. She sent the finished gloves by the carrier's boy, with a note that said only that the commission was complete, and she would not after all be able to continue the arrangement, her own work at Milestone requiring her full attention. It was not entirely a lie. It was not entirely the truth either, and she knew it, walking back to the chandler's rooms in a rain that had turned the road to the same grey soup as the sky, thinking that she had been made a fool of gently, which she was beginning to suspect might be worse than being made a fool of cruelly, because at least cruelty did not ask you to have liked it while it happened. She did not cry on the walk home. She had learned long ago not to, where it showed. She let herself, once, alone in her own 2 rooms with the door barred, and the fire unlit for want of coal, put her face in her ruined turnip hands for the length of one held breath, and then she took it away again, and did not do it a second time. The Duke of Faircross received the finished gloves and the note in the same hour, and read the note 3 times before he understood fully what it was that had gone wrong, and how entirely he had done it to himself. He did not go after her that night, nor the next. Something in him, old and stubborn, argued that a man of his rank did not chase what had walked away, that dignity required him to wait for an apology to be requested rather than volunteered. It was Mrs. Herrick, 3 days on, who disabused him of this notion, standing in his study with her hands folded, and her face set in the particular expression she had used on him since he was a boy of 9, and had done something he knew better than to do. "You let her believe you are nobody, your Grace, because it suited you to be looked at plain, for once, by someone who wanted nothing from you. I understand the wanting of it. I do not excuse the doing of it." She set down the tea-tray harder than tea-trays generally require. That girl has been lied to by circumstance her whole life. Poverty lies to a person daily, telling them they are worth less than they are. You are the first person of any consequence who ever troubled to see her true, and then you went and did the same lying everyone else does, only dressed finer. I did not mean it as cruelty. No one ever does, your Grace. That is rather the trouble with it. He sat with that a long while after she had gone, the fire burning low, and thought of a woman who had not looked round to see if anyone of consequence was watching her pay a beggar's christening fee, and of himself, watching, and saying nothing, for 2 months, out of a comfort he had not earned, and a rank he had not troubled to spend honestly. He thought, too, of what Mrs. Herrick had not needed to say aloud, which was that he loved her, plainly and entirely, and had known it for some weeks, and had been a coward about the one thing that mattered, because the disguise had let him be looked at as a man rather than a title, and he had not wanted to give that up, even for honesty, even for her. It was Mrs. Herrick, in the end, who went to Marston herself, on the pretext of ordering ribbon from the haberdasher, and found her way, as she had always intended to the 2 rooms above the chandler's shop. Wren let her in because it was Mrs. Herrick and not the Duke, and because 3 days of stitching pig-hide by a cold grate had left her too tired to keep the door shut against a kind face. "I have not come to plead his case, Mrs., Herrick said, settling into the room's one good chair without being asked, in the manner of a woman used to being welcome wherever she chose to sit. "I have come to tell you some things you do not know, and then you may do with them what you like. I know enough. You know he let you believe a falsehood for 2 months. You do not know why, and you do not know what else he has been doing quietly this whole while, that you have benefited from without ever being told." Mrs. Herrick folded her hands. "Peg Dallow's rent, did you think that arranged itself?" Wren's needle stopped, and the doctor sent to old Tom Farrow, when his chest went bad last month, that the whole parish thought was parish charity, and the roof mended on the almshouse that everyone credited to the vicar's collection plate, when the collection plate that quarter would not have covered the nails. He asked, every single time, not to be named. "I have kept his accounts 20 years, Aldridge, and I tell you there is a ledger in that man's study thick, with good done in the dark, and not 1 page of it signed. Why tell me now? Because you are the only person I have ever seen him tell the truth to, without being made to," Mrs. Herrick said. "He has been telling it to you in every way except the one that mattered, this whole while, and I think, whatever you decide, you ought to know the whole of a man before you close a door on him, for the part of him that was afraid." Wren sat with the glove unfinished in her lap for a long while after Mrs. Herrick had gone, the fire popping once, low, and thought of a fist no bigger than a walnut, curled in sleep, and a rent quietly paid, and a doctor sent, and a name withheld each time, not from shame, she understood now, but from something nearer to the same instinct that had made her give away her own last shillings and refuse to be thanked for it. She did not decide anything that night. She only sat, and thought, and let the fire burn down, and in the morning she found she had decided anyway, the way decisions arrive sometimes, not in a single moment, but as something that had already happened while she was not looking. The Duke of Faircross came to Milestone himself 3 days later, on foot in the plain grey coat, because he thought she would open the door to that coat sooner than to a carriage with a crest on the door, and he was right. She let him in. The room was small, and the fire was lit. For once, because Mrs. Herrick had sent coal without being asked, which Wren had noticed and said nothing about. "I did not come to make you listen to an apology you have not asked for," he said, standing just inside the door, hat in his hands like a man twice his own age suddenly unsure of himself. "I came because I owed you the truth, and I have put off paying that debt a good deal longer than I let you put off yours, at the parish house, and you paid yours the same hour it came due." "Then pay it," she said, and sat, and did not offer him a chair, which he understood, correctly, as permission to say what he had come to say standing, as a man ought to when he has wronged someone. "My name is Julian Cardew." That much was never a lie. What I did not tell you is that I am also the Duke of Faircross, and I let you believe otherwise, because the first time I ever saw you, you were giving away money you could not spare to a woman who could do nothing for you in return, without once looking round to see if anyone of consequence was watching you do it. He turned the hat once in his hands. I have spent my whole life being looked at as a title first, and a man somewhere very far second. I wanted, for once, to be looked at the other way round. I did not think, when I began it, how much it would cost you to be lied to in order to give me that comfort. I am sorry for it. I would be sorrier still if I let the sorrow be the last word, without telling you why it mattered so much to me, what I saw that day. Then tell me. I wanted to see who you were when you believed no one of rank could see you, he said. That is the only test that tells the truth about a person. Everyone is generous when they are watched. You gave everything you had to a stranger's child in a doorway, with a clerk who would forget you by supper, and you did not once look round for credit. I have met a great many people since I was a boy who could perform kindness beautifully in a drawing-room. I had never, until that morning, seen anyone simply do it, and mean nothing further by it, and want nothing further from it. Wren looked at her own hands, folded in her lap, red at the knuckle, steady. "I am not asking you to forgive the lie tonight," he said. "I am not asking you for anything tonight, in fact. I have done enough asking of you without telling you what I was asking for. I will go, if you wish it, and not come again unless you send for me. Or you may tell me to sit down, and I will, and we may begin again, plainly as two people, rather than a duke and a glove-maker. And you may take whatever time you require to decide whether a man who lied to you out of cowardice is worth the risk of a second chance. I would rather have your no, freely given, than your yes, because you felt a duke's asking left you no honest room to refuse." "Sit down," Wren said, "Julian Cardew," and something in his face, hearing his own name used plain, without the title riding beside it, came as close to breaking open as she had ever seen it. He sat. The fire popped once. Neither of them said anything for a while, and it was, for the first time since Cross Lane, a silence that asked nothing of either of them. "I want to be spoken to plainly from now on," she said at last, "whatever the cost of the plainness. I would rather be told an unkind truth than a kind lie, my lord, and I think you understand now why. I understand it better than I would have liked to learn it. And I want no more secrets kept from me for my own comfort. I have had a whole life of people deciding what a poor woman is strong enough to be told. I find I am strong enough for most things, if I am only given them plain. You have my word," he said, "on both." "Then I do not know that I have anything further to forgive," she said, "beyond the ordinary forgiving that any two honest people owe each other, having both been afraid of something, in their own way, at some point or other. I love you," he said, because it seemed suddenly the plainest thing left to say, and the truest, and he had promised her plainness not an hour before. "Not for the charity done, and not for anything I rescued you from, because I did not rescue you from anything. You were never in need of rescuing. I love you for the fact that you paid a beggar's fee without looking round to see who was watching, and for the fact that you sent my gloves back finished, even after you had decided never to speak to me again, because you had given your word on the work. I have not met honesty like that in my life, and I do not intend to let it go, now that I have found it. unless you tell me plainly to." "I do not tell you to," Wren said. It was the only word she needed, in the end, though it took her the whole conversation and half a lifetime of caution to arrive at it plain. He asked her some while later if he might, and she said he might, and he drew the glove from her right hand himself, finger by finger, slow, as if the leather were something owed more care than most men troubled to give it. And when her bare hand lay in his at last, red at the knuckle and steady, he raised it and kissed the back of it, once, and did not reach for anything further, and she found she did not want him to. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me the truth, in the end." "Thank you," he said, "for not letting my rank by your good opinion 2 months ago, when a lesser woman would have." She laughed, a short, surprised sound she had not expected of herself, at the two of them thanking each other for opposite things in the same breath, and he laughed too. Which Mrs. Herrick would later say, on hearing of it, that the roof ought by rights to have come down. They were married in the spring, quietly, in the same church whose clerk had once refused a beggar's christening for want of 2 shillings, and the register that day recorded, in Mr. Pell's own careful hand, the marriage of Julian Cardew, Duke of Faircross, to Wren Aldridge, glovemaker, of Marston, and Mr. Pell, who had learned a thing or two since December, did not charge a fee for the entry, and did not mention that he had not. Peg Dallow stood at the back of the church with Samuel on her hip, grown fat and loud, and entirely unimpressed by the solemnity of the occasion, and wept, openly, the good kind of crying that costs nothing and asks for nothing, and no one thought the less of her for it. Lady Cassandra Thorne did not attend. She had, in the weeks following the assembly, found her welcome at Faircross thinning by careful degrees, and had removed herself to Bath before the banns were even read a second time, where she wrote occasional letters of a coolness that the Duchess of Faircross, by then, could read without her hands losing their steadiness at all. A year on, the fire at Faircross burned in the same grate where Julian had once turned a hat in his hands and told the truth at last, and Wren sat beside it with her bare hand in his, the glove drawn off and set neatly on the table between them the way it was set every evening now. A small habit that had become, without either of them quite noticing, a kind of vow renewed each night before the fire. The north room had become a proper workshop by then, 3 girls under Wren's instruction, Peg Dallow among them, her stitches improving steadily, her boy toddling underfoot in a christening gown Wren had made herself and never once been paid for, because some things, she had decided long ago, were not for selling. There was a pair of small knitted gloves on the mantel that winter, made for Samuel's second, that nobody in the house had ever seen anyone put there, and nobody troubled to ask who had, because by then the whole household had learnt that some kindnesses at Faircross arrived without a name attached, and were better simply received than investigated. Wren's hand did not let go of his that evening, nor for a good while after, and outside a rook called once, over the frost, the same sound that had followed her the winter she gave away everything she had to a stranger's child, and asked for nothing back. Character, in the end, is only what a person does when they believe no one of any consequence is watching, and it is rarely rewarded for the reason people expect, and it is, in the quiet accounting of things, very nearly always repaid.